And I mean, we've seen this, right? Nobody is exempt from challenge, from adversity, from obstacles. We all have it in our life. It's going to come sooner or later. That's what the 41 life is, though. Overcoming those challenges, overcoming those obstacles as they come at us and coming out stronger on the other side. So that's what we're here for. That's what we're about. We want to provide encouragement. We want to help people to keep going through those times, and we want to have some fun along the way. This is the 41 life. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us this week. I'm David.
And I'm Devin.
And this is the 41 Life. This is episode 6. Hard to believe that we're already on episode 6. I feel like each week we've said that, but
I know, I'm like, what have we even talked about?
I know.
How have we spent almost 6 hours talking?
Yeah. But like I said, we're excited that you guys are here with us for this week. Thankful that you guys have joined us and kept up with everything. If you've made it to this point, then you know that it's been a pretty wild ride and it's still not done. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. It feels like where we left off last episode was I had finally gotten the diagnosis, or at least the initial diagnosis, that it was cancer. And that's where we're going to pick up this week. But we did this a couple weeks ago and we thought it was kind of fun and got pretty good response from it. So we're going to do a couple more table topics questions. We'd love to hear y'all's response as well. This is a good way for y'all to get to know us and for us to get to know y'all. So with that being said, you want to start out this time?
Yes.
I started last time.
I will start. Let's see. Okay. I know the answer to this question, but what is under your bed right now? Do you even know what's under our bed?
Under our
Yeah.
bed? I mean, other than monsters. No. I know I have a baseball bat under there.
Yeah.
You never know when that's going to come in handy. I'm sure we have some decor stuff under there. I know recently you talked about you got some type of storage boxes that were flat enough to
Not
be
under our bed though.
Yeah, well,
it's funny because I know exactly what's under our bed right now.
Yeah, I don't deal with under the bed too much. So
there is a weighted blanket.
Okay.
Wrapping paper.
Okay.
And lots of cat toys because our cat Penny loves to gather all of her toys and put them under there.
Yeah, she tends to lose them pretty quickly. Yeah. And then we'll go fish them out and she'll find a way to lose it again pretty quickly. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. She keeps them under
I did know the weighted blanket part.
Yeah. Because I used to sleep every night with a weighted blanket. That was like a part of our nightly routine. I would get in bed and lay there and they would throw it on top of me. Yeah. But now we have like a pretty thick comforter. Yeah. So I don't really use that as much anymore. Yeah. But I will tell you, like, if you're someone who has anxiety or like you struggle to sleep, the weighted blanket, you should try it out if you haven't.
Yeah, just be careful that if you're a hot sleeper, take that into account.
But maybe. I used to be so scared sleeping without you, and I had to sleep without you a lot because you traveled for baseball. Mm-hmm. And I would feel completely like safe under that blanket when you were here, which is a big reason why I started sleeping under it.
I mean, it makes sense. And I know you said pretty often that it worked and it really helped you. So, yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yep. So,
but, yeah. All
plug
right.
For the weighted blanket.
Devin knows what's under our bed better than I do.
Yes. I actually wanted to ask you that because I was like, I bet he has no idea.
I had a little idea, but not a very good idea. All right. I'll go first one. So this one, I picked it because Halloween's coming up.
Okay.
And I felt like this was a fun question. What's your favorite Halloween costume that you've worn?
I'm going to have to say when I was Cruella de Vil. And I was younger. But my mom spray painted half my hair white and half of my hair black. And I really got into character, if you look back at pictures.
That's not surprising.
Like, really, I had a boa, a feather boa. I had like a black velvet dress, and I wasn't smiling in a single picture. I refused because I was like, no, like I really need to.
Had to get into
Corella
character
doesn't
for real.
Smile.
Yeah.
So if you go and find those pictures, it's just me straight face the whole night.
I mean, that's true commitment right there. I mean, what kid doesn't want to smile on Halloween, right? Especially you're getting candy and you.
Oh, and my little sister was a Dalmatian, which I feel like needs to be added in.
Did you have a leash on her? Like
she was a baby, but she was crawling around, so it did fit.
It works. It works. I'd like to see those pictures at some point. I haven't seen those yet.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Okay. What do you remember about the homes your family has lived in?
So, growing up, my parents got divorced when I was pretty young. And so I lived in a few different houses. But I have pretty vivid memories of each one.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in Florida, and I remember our house in Florida, and I have a very infamous childhood story.
You gotta tell it. Don't leave them hanging.
Well, okay, I'll go ahead. I don't want to cut off all the other houses, but I was probably 3 or 4 at this point, maybe even younger than that. I was still, just making a mess everywhere I went. This is about 3 a.m, something like that. And I remember being in the kitchen and just mixing all stuff together. And it was awesome. I didn't even know what I was mixing. And I remember my mom came in and was very concerned, had a very concerned look on her face. And she asked what I was doing. And I told her I was making tea. Well, it turns out this tea was nothing but intense cleaning supplies that we kept under the kitchen sink. So I knew at that point science was going to be something in my future because I was just mixing stuff up from a young age. But I remember that when I was in Florida. We moved to Tennessee when I was about 5. My parents didn't want me going to school in Miami. And there were some other factors that went into it. But anyway, we moved to Tennessee, and the first house that we were at when we moved there was a stone house. That was kind of like the distinctive feature. And then we moved, that was right by the church we were going to when we moved there too. There was a giant hill. And I remember that hill, when it would snow or get icy, it got pretty nasty. Then we moved to, it was the North Collins house. We had a really cool yard. We had a stream in the back. I got to go back and play. Probably, found some snakes, and probably a miracle I didn't get bit. We had a wooded area back there. Then we moved to my next house. I remember, actually, we stayed there when my parents got divorced, and then I had another house. That one, I remember the yard in particular in that house. We got a dog. Her name was Lucky. She was a German Shepherd Husky mix. And she was such a great, I just have a lot of memories going outside and playing with her. We had a big fenced in yard. That was fun. And then the last house that I had in Tullahoma in Tennessee was my mom had moved over there. And that was, I remember, as weird as this sounds, I don't know why, the driveway. I remember you had to kind of come around the back, and it would turn. It was not a circular driveway, but we kind of made it circular. So I don't know why the parking situation was always interesting back there, but we made it work. And then, the house that we're in now, yeah, we have a lot of distinctive features, I would say.
Yeah. Yep, we've lived here since 2018.
Yeah.
So we've definitely had time to make it our own.
Yeah. There's been a lot of others, just throughout baseball time. And
oh, yeah.
It's a good thing you didn't ask about hotels, because we would have been here all night talking about that.
And we've lived in probably 10 to 15 places in baseball life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could go through each one of them in my head.
Yeah. That's kind of a tough question because, I've had my fair share of places that I've lived and all of them have distinctive aspects, but I don't, I could go into a lot more detail, but for the sake of time, maybe.
Yeah.
So For you. All right. What do you miss most about being younger?
Honestly, I had a really good childhood, and I miss, this is deep, I miss not knowing how harsh life can be.
That's fair.
Like, I just didn't, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I feel like now there's just a sense of, I don't want to say fear, but I've just obviously experienced a lot, seen a lot, and I just know like what the world can bring now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lightheartedness that you get to have when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Not everyone does, but I was blessed enough to be able to have that and just play and go to bed and wake up the next day and do it again.
There you go. What more could you ask for? I mean,
didn't have to pay bills. I mean, gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Bills are kind of the worst.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we'll get right into it. If there's any answers that you guys have that you think are interesting, funny, whatever, let us know. Comment, I see them, we see them, mm-hmm. We read them. Kind words mean a lot to us. Funny words, we laugh. So definitely comment and let us know what you guys think with that. But we'll get into it. Picking up at the hospital. Mm-hmm. I had, at this point, I think where we left off, I had just kind of laid into a doctor, and I'm not so proud of that moment, but yeah. It had been a very long day, so maybe there's a little grace there, but yeah, that was a very long night. I remember every few hours, nurses were coming in, having to check on different things.
I ended up not being able to stay with you. I didn't spend the night with you that night. I vividly remember that night because it was crazy how quickly like family came in. Yeah. Because my parents' house was packed with people.
Yeah.
And I remember I slept with my sister that night.
Okay.
And I remember waking up and me and my sister just laying in bed, and she was like, it feels like Christmas with everyone being here, but it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. That's a sad thing.
I know. And then I just remember being out on the porch, like me and your mom were going to like take turns going to see you or mm-hmm. something. And I just remember your mom crying.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I didn't see, I saw my fair share of the emotions and everything, mm-hmm. but I feel like whenever you're going through something like that, everybody kind of tries to keep it together or hold it together in front of you.
Well, and we had so much to process.
Yeah.
And so much had happened in a short period. Like our life just flipped upside down in the matter of 24 hours. That time yesterday, you were going to go to Med Express for high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And that's how fast life can change.
Yeah, it does happen that fast. And especially anybody that has been through, cancer in particular, like you get that. I think this, diagnosis date was like a Tuesday or something like that. It was mm-hmm. earlier middle of the week. And they were in talks like, are you good to start next week for treatment?
Well, so when did you get the biopsy?
I got the biopsy. So I got admitted, call it Tuesday night. I don't remember the exact day of the week. The next morning, so Wednesday morning, I would have gotten the biopsy. And that was not fun. Yeah. So we kind of went into it a little bit last episode, but to be a little bit more detailed, like Devin said, I had a cantaloupe-sized tumor in my chest that was pressing on my windpipe, my arteries, my veins. I was not able to breathe very well. It was pushing on my heart. There was a lot of concern with a lot of different things. And so because of all that, they had to go in at a little bit of a different angle than they normally would, I think. And I have a very, very high pain tolerance and tolerance for medicine. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they didn't give me enough of the painkiller in that area or the numbing agent, whatever it was. But I felt it. I felt the needle go in. I felt them kind of moving around. And when they actually, I felt the pinch and them pulling off, coming out. So not to get too ahead of ourselves, I did have to have another biopsy and made sure to say this experience. And I remember in that biopsy, the nurse, kind of took it into account. And I remember got into the operating room and they're like, you want to give him how much of that pain or that numbing stuff?
Not you want to give him, you gave him how much.
Yeah.
Because he just did it.
Yeah. And
she thought he was joking.
Yeah.
She was like, what did you do? And he told her, and she was like, haha, that's funny.
Yeah.
And he said, no, really. And she was like, you're joking.
Yeah. And it like was just normal for me. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm all sorts of messed up, guys, in more ways than just this. But anyways, so we get the biopsy and I had to stay one more night, but I got discharged the following day. So call it Thursday.
I think they had given you some heparin and your numbers were looking better. And I also think at that point they had realized that they couldn't surgically remove this thing. Yeah,
it was too integrated into, it was going to be too risky basically. Yeah. And so we knew that pretty much no matter what, I was looking at chemo. I think the question was, do we incorporate radiation? Kind of how do we, depending on what the cancer
and what kind of chemo.
Yeah. So we were waiting on those results.
Something else that I think is notable too is the night that you got admitted to the hospital, I texted Carly, the previous owner of Lizard Thicket, and I said, like, we got to call it off. There's no way I could continue on with this. Like, the news we just got, like, yeah, it's over. Yeah. And we had, like, kind of began, like, some steps. Yeah. And I just remember being like, dang, like, yeah, this is a lot at once.
Yeah. Well, and as we know, that was not the end. Yes. That was actually the beginning. So there was a lot happening at that time. Like Devin said, there was a lot of processing. There was a lot of just getting everything together and situated. So one thing that I do remember very distinctly was your aunt.
Yes.
She was she's very,
she walks very closely with God.
Yeah, very spiritually in tune with kind of what God is saying. And
she definitely has like a gift.
Yes. There's been a lot of things that, she's talked with me about, talked with Devin about, talked with her whole family and my family as well. And there's definitely a lot of in tuneness. I remember she was one of the people that came into town and she was very adamant, apparently, like, I need to get in there and see him. I have something I need to tell him. And she came in because it was kind of like everybody was trying to get breakfast in there for me because I was eating hospital food and like, asking me, do I want any coffee or anything? And so I remember she came in first before everybody else.
Only one person at a time could come in.
And, I hold things together very well. Like Devin can attest to this.
You've cried twice, I think.
Maybe.
You're just so steady.
Yeah,
no matter what is going on, high or low, you are steady.
Yeah, I mean, life.
Which I think is a gift that God has definitely given you.
Yeah, and so I remember sitting there. It was the morning after I'd been admitted. I didn't sleep good that night because nurses, like I said, were coming in and doing all sorts of stuff, and I was tired. I was trying to process everything, and I just remember that I completely lost it in the hotel room because I just remember thinking, what is it?
In the hotel room?
I said hotel room, in the hospital room. Oh my gosh. But I just completely lost it. I just remember everything came to a head and I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is our life. Like, I know there's a reason for this, and I'm thinking through all those things, but it all came out. And of course, right at that time, there's a knock on the door, and it was Devin's aunt. And I'm also, I don't know, I don't necessarily even intend to be this way. I think I'm just a pretty stoic person. And so, like, I actually was, like, embarrassed. And I was just like, I'm so sorry that you had to see this. She was like, what are you embarrassed about? This is what I expected to see. And anyways, so she comes in the room, and she said, I feel like God's given me something that I need to pass along to you. And I feel like it's very important that you heard this immediately. And at this point, I have no idea what could possibly be coming. I mean, there's a million and one things that it probably could have been. And she said, I've had this image and I've had the verses from Daniel. And at first I was just like, no way she's about to say what I think she's about to say. And then she said the image that she had in her head was me and you in the fire, and there was another person and like just protecting us. Like there was a ring of protection around us and we were unscathed. And there was other stuff, but I mean, I remember we just, we both just lost it because I told her that I had, that exact same thing had, I felt like God was saying that to me. So yeah, I mean, with all that happening, I feel like there was just this comfort and a peace that made no sense, but it really felt like from the get-go, God was saying like, I'm here. It's not that you're not going to go through the difficulties, but like I am present during this time. I'm protecting you through this, even if it may not appear that way on the surface. And like we said last week, that's definitely been the case. There's so many times through this and leading up to this that I mean, I should have had a really bad outcome. I shouldn't be here telling you this story, but I
I
am.
feel like too, it's just been so crazy to see just the way that God has shown up in this experience and like the things that we've both experienced that I've never experienced. I just said the word experience 10 times, but in my walk with God. But it was so just amazing because there's, it talks about in the Bible that God draws near to the brokenhearted. And that is just so true.
Yeah.
Like, he can't help it. Like, his child's hurting, he's there. He's there in a different way. And, I've talked to like some of my friends, like Steph, for example, and she's like, I don't by any means like want it to sound like I'm jealous of what you've gone through, but the experiences that you've had are so incredible. Like I would love to get to experience that. But I remember early on whenever we first got the news, like I'm a super visual person. Mm-hmm. And whenever I'm upset or happy or whatever, I just like to take walks and put my music in, and like that's kind of like where I process a lot. And I just got this visual image of the biggest lion walking next to me when I took my walks, and me like holding on to his mane.
Yeah.
And he didn't say anything, but it was just like that's how like tangible his presence was. And I'll never forget, right after I first kind of like was getting this visual, I don't remember what song it was that came on my phone, but the album cover was a lion. And I was just like, that, oh my gosh. Like, I just felt like God was validating, like, what you're feeling, like, is. And I don't know why in the world that was what I saw.
Yeah.
But he just made himself so known.
Yeah.
And we have like a million stories, which we'll get into.
But we may have to have an episode.
That's one of the first stories, I feel like.
We may have to have an episode or two just getting into that. And you guys may walk away from that thinking that we're a little out of our mind. But I mean, there's been a lot of very interesting experiences that, I mean, you
well, and I feel like everything that we've experienced is so crazy, but it's a big reason why we wanted to start this podcast.
Yep.
Because we felt like we needed to share the way that God had revealed himself. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely going to be really hard to do because, like you said, you might think we're a little crazy. But I really do think it comes down to like what I said, like he draws near to the brokenhearted. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I was hurting so badly that the only thing getting me through the day was talking to him constantly and reading my Bible. And the more you abide in him, the more he speaks to you.
Yeah.
So I was constantly with him. So he was constantly with me. And it was just so crazy the way that I felt him and experienced him. And there's a verse that I love, Psalm 91:4. And it basically just says, like, he will cover you with his wings and, like, protect you until this disaster has passed. Mm-hmm. And I always had that verse on my mind. And like I said, I'm an incredibly visual person. And so sometimes I would just be hurting so bad that like I couldn't pray. Like I just didn't
Which
have
is normal.
words. Yeah, I didn't have words.
Yeah.
But I needed him.
I was listening to a podcast and somebody was on there and actually talked about that briefly.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name, but she's like a well-respected writer, has a lot of credibility. And she talked about some when you go through
Mm-hmm.
tragic times, like difficult times, that's when having people around you, like you don't have the words to pray because you're just trying to make it through, and
Yeah.
that's where like people surround you and cover you in prayer, and
Mm-hmm.
so that way like when you can't, you're still covered. And it
Yeah.
was just really interesting.
Yeah.
And for you to kind of say that,
Mm-hmm.
like the kind of correlation is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I didn't have the energy to pray. Like, and so I would get this visual image of him sitting on the throne and me crawling up in his lap. And every time I have this visual, like I always see the holes in his wrists, in
mm-hmm.
Jesus's wrists. And I like curl up in his arm basically and just lay there.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because whenever I was hurting really bad, I would get this visual of these giant wings coming from behind the throne and covering me completely.
Mm.
And I was just in the dark, like while he was holding me.
Yeah.
And I still like that's my go-to. Like when I'm stressed and I'm hurting and I don't even know what to pray, I just do that. Like get that visual in my head of crawling, and I'll even lay there for a minute and just imagine that
Mm-hmm.
until I find the strength to find the words to pray or calm down or whatever. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I never would have done before.
Yeah.
Like gotten that visual and just feeling his presence like that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that happens when, not just going through bad times, but especially in those times when you're really pressing into him. Like when you're, I think, giving yourself an opportunity to hear and see what he wants you to hear and see.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, when things are going really well, we tend to not pay as close of attention to it or make the space for him to speak to us the same way or just to
Mm-hmm.
spend time, because even though we're grateful and we're appreciative, there's an element of like, oh, things are good right now. Like, let's ride this wave.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that wave crashes and you need help getting up, that's when you start to kind of refocus on what he's saying. But
Well,
I
and I
mean,
feel like too, I mean, throughout this journey, I view God so differently than I did before, even being a Christian and walking with him, because, I feel like we've talked about this. There can be a major difference between Christianity and following Jesus and Christian culture.
mm-hmm,
Those things can be two totally separate things.
yes,
And,
very much
I
so.
think for a while I was really more oriented towards Christian culture.
Mm-hmm,
Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, do my Christian peers, like, are they judging me? Like, am I doing the right thing? And then kind of like pinning that on God too. Like, is he judging me? Am I enough for him? Like, I keep failing. Like, I didn't move to Africa and become a missionary. Like, I'm not fully obedient, all of this stuff. And it was just very rigid
mm-hmm,
and kind of sad
yeah,
and like not very fun. But like now that I've experienced God in the way that I have, like this is a God that I imagine curling up in his arm.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's the God that I know now so intimately.
mm-hmm,
And I just view him totally different when I mess up, when I'm being hard on myself. Like I view him as so gracious and loving, and like I'm so glad that I've gotten to experience him the way that I have, because before I had it all wrong for a really long time. I
mm-hmm,
always knew that he loved me and I always felt that, but I let the other stuff kind of equally matter as much, like the works.
right,
And now I'm just like, it's really not about that at all.
yeah,
Like it really is not. It is just about he loves me and I need him and
mm-hmm,
I love him. And out of that relationship, then comes acts.
yeah, yeah. It's a byproduct
Yeah, not
of.
acts and then love.
Well, it's the same way I think about it, in the sense of we're married. I care about you. I love you a lot. Because of that, I want to make sure that you're provided for in the things that you care about. Like, I want to enter into those things with you. You know
Well,
what I
and we
mean?
both have little things that we like done a certain way
Yeah.
that we would otherwise not do.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you're very paranoid about the cats getting out.
Yeah.
And I know that about you. So because of that, I take extra measures to make sure they don't get out to give you peace.
Yeah.
Like, I close the garage door before I open the door to our house to create the barrier. I make sure they're not around when I leave. And like, I'm going to be honest, when you're not here, I don't always take those steps.
I know.
Because I love you and I want to give you peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, like, I wouldn't do that for you, like, all the time otherwise. Like, my love for you in our relationship, like, I've learned you.
Yeah.
I've learned what you like. You love me. You care for me. Like,
yeah.
The actions come out of that.
Right. Exactly.
And it's not one of those things where I'm like, I'm going to not let the cat out so that David doesn't strike me down and hate me.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm only thinking this is something that he cares about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do stuff when you're coming from that place. Mm-hmm. And even like knowing God too, I'm like, I know him. Like, I know him well enough now to know I could mess up 1,000,002 times. And I have felt his love enough to know that would not matter. Yeah. Like, I've felt it strongly enough to know there is nothing I can do. Mm-hmm. I could mess up the rest of my life, and I know how much he loves me. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much peace that comes from that.
Well, and with that, when you know that you have this space to try and do your best, but if you fall short, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, that doesn't mean you just don't care and you go do whatever you want. It just means that you can live, like you said, in peace. You can live more freely. You can have the comfort of knowing that there's nothing that I can do that's going to mess this up enough. Like, as long as I have that true, genuine relationship and I'm continually just looking to how can I be shaped more in his image? Yeah. How can I love people the way he loves people? How can I, something that's not talked about. And, I feel like, especially as a guy, it's not talked about. And this is kind of weird to say, like, how can I care about myself in a way that he cares about me? Because I'm not good at that.
Well, I feel like that's a huge thing that I've learned too. Like, as I've gotten closer with God and I see how much he loves me, I value myself a lot more now than I did. Yeah. Like, I'm a lot more careful about the way that I speak to myself and how I set boundaries, because I'm like, if he loves me this much, then he wants me to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't want me sitting there saying, I'm XYZ, failure, not good enough, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Like.
And that's where I'm really bad.
Yes, you are. I'm always having to.
Yeah. I'm incredibly hard on myself. I tell Devin this a lot. Like, if you could hear what's said to me in my head, it's probably not, it's nothing that I would say to anybody else. And I don't know why I say that to myself, but that, to that point, like, that's something I'm actively trying to push back on, because I know that that's not true. Those negative things, like, that's not the reality of the situation. That's not who I am. That's not the way I'm viewed. And why would I, put that on myself?
We don't have kids, but I have a cat.
We got two.
It's the closest thing I can think. But if we had a kid, a cat, whatever, saying to themselves, "Oh, I'm so ugly. I'm terrible. Like, I hate myself." That would break my heart.
Yeah. And you would actively try to
make them feel better.
Right. Well, make them feel better, but also address kind of that root thing and be like, let me let you understand that that's not who you are. That's not real. That's not truth.
As we go deeper into the podcast, like, something that I've experienced is like hearing God's voice audibly. And also I've gotten visions, which is hard for me to say on a public platform. That's kind of something I just kept for me and the people close to me. But, if I could go back and tell me 5 years ago something about God, I would say, you would not believe how personal he is and how much he loves you and how much he just wants to spend time with you. I'll never forget, I was driving to work and I was praying and I talked to God just like I talk to anybody else. Like, I make jokes, and because I don't know how else to communicate. And so I was praying and I made a joke to God, and I heard audibly, "You're funny." And I don't know why I started sobbing.
I mean, it makes
because
sense.
it's hard to put into words, but like I felt so seen
Mm-hmm.
and like known and loved. Because you think about when you hear God's voice, it's like, you know, something about the future or, you know, a prophecy or, you know, conviction or whatever. But to just hear you're funny,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm like,
Just
oh my
a
gosh,
daily
like,
normal conversation. Yeah.
and and he made me that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the intimacy that came from that. Like I will carry that with me for the rest of my life. Just that one sentence.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. All that to say, this is just the beginning of the stories
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have.
There's so, yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and I feel like we've said it's not easy for us to get on here and share this stuff, but we're trying to be obedient,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm-hmm.
felt like it's time to share.
Yeah. There are definitely challenges involved because, I mean, growing up, I didn't think that stuff really happened.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any experiences like that. And then I mean, I had heard like, God like give feelings and kind of talk a little bit, but to the extent of the things that we've had, over the last few years,
Yeah.
I mean, if you would have told me, you know, 15-year-old me like that, like I would have been like, you're out of your mind, but we'll see.
I think
Okay.
also too something to keep in mind is all of these stories are over the span of 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's not like something was happening every single day.
Right.
Like sometimes there would be months where I didn't hear anything
Yeah.
from him audibly, or I felt him, but you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've always kind of had the gift of discernment, and I got like a couple visions in college. Like I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you remember, but
Yeah.
it really flourished, I guess you could say, like
Yeah.
in this time.
Yeah. But that is definitely something we will circle back around to and get more into at another time,
And
because
if
I
I
think
scared
that
you, I'm sorry.
yeah, there's some really cool stuff though, honestly, like that we have talked to people about and kind of like tried to sift through it and almost make sure like
Are we losing it?
did our brain just make something crazy up,
Like, do you
and
need to check us into
yeah,
hospital? Like, are we okay?
yeah,
Like,
and we're here. So that
no
was
one's
not the
checked us in
case,
yet,
but
so
we'll definitely continue talking about these things as we're going through the story. I know we keep saying it, but there is still a lot to go. And when these conversations come up organically, about faith, we want to take time and dive into that. And that's a lot of what this episode was. And we didn't get to cover as much story wise, but we're going to keep chugging along. But
still,
when
this is all part of the story, though.
yeah, I mean, when these moments come up, I feel like, if you're listening, then I feel like that's something that you want to hear, and it's something that we want to tell. So that is a big part of the story, just as much as the diagnosis and the treatment and the process that we've been through over the last few years. And so we are chugging along and having a good time with it. And so next week we will pick up right where we left off this week. We will get to the diagnosis. We talked about the biopsy and cut off there, and then we went down a faith avenue, which you got to do sometimes.
Yeah.
But we'll start next week with the biopsy results and how it was
Rather confusing.
It was very confusing, very shocking initially until we got
An
a little
already
clarity.
bizarre situation
Yeah,
became even more bizarre.
yeah. It was something that we definitely needed to have a little light shed on and kind of figured out. And once we did, there was we had a little bit more peace about the situation.
Yeah.
So we'll get there next week, and I'm sure we'll have some Faith Avenue discussions mixed in there as well. But in the meantime, hope you guys enjoyed this, and if so, continue rating, reviewing, telling friends, interact with us. We're on social media. I can't call it X. It just doesn't sound right. It's Twitter. It's Twitter at the 41 Life Pod, Instagram and TikTok at the 41 Life Podcast. And we're going to keep you guys updated kind of as we go with everything, but continue to just do what you're doing. It's been incredible so far to see the response, and we're so grateful for
and
you
we
guys.
need encouragement.
Yeah.
So we love to receive it because
Yes.
we need it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So thank you guys for that, and honestly, just thank you guys for being here with us and going through this journey with us. It's been fun so far, and we're excited to see where it goes, and as we continue, just to get to, like we said early on, get to know y'all better, and y'all get to know us better. But um, on that note, hope you guys have a really great week. Hope everything goes smoothly, and you don't run into any crazy situations like we're talking about here. But yeah, I'm David.
and I'm Devin.
And that'll do it. This has been the 41 Life. Thanks, guys.
See you next week.